Hi, in this lecture I'm going to talk about the tools that are used in order to assemble the Arduino robot in this course. Very simple, only just 3 tools plus one optional tool that I will talk about in a minute. So starting from the left, a set of precision cutters is useful in order to cut the length of the pins of things like resistors to make them fit better onto your breadboard, and also to trim down the cable ties that are used in order to attach the motors onto the chassis. So a small set of precision cutters like this one would be a really good thing to have nearby. Then for manipulating small things, something like this, precision tweezer is also very good. This is an ESD, an electrostatic tweezer, and I use it to pick things like small screws out of a container, or to place jumper wires onto the breadboard, or to manipulate small parts like a small 330 ohm resistor precisely onto the breadboard. So this makes life much easier, but strictly speaking, not absolutely necessary. Good to have. Now, probably the most useful item here is this screwdriver set. So with this screwdriver set, obviously it's got quite a lot of bits here. The ones that I needed were this bit here, the Phillips screw head for using with the various screws that I found in my drawers. And another bit that was very useful is this one here, a hexagonal bit. This was used for, again, certain screws that I found in my drawers and decided to use. They were not Phillips, but they had this hexagonal head on it. So just these 2 bits out of my toolbox is all I needed. Another thing that is handy to have nearby is something like this, a bit of electrical adhesive tape, just to temporarily secure a few things onto the chassis, such as the mini breadboard, for example. You can just use tape to attach the breadboard onto the chassis as you are prototyping things. So that's another useful thing to have around. Now, I mentioned that in some cases, this aside, I also mentioned that there's one optional component, and that is a soldering iron. You will need a soldering iron if you decide to use a prototyping shield like this one when you decide to fix the circuit of your breadboard, and instead of keeping the components loose on the breadboard, just to make them a bit more permanent using the prototyping shield. There's many prototyping shields like this one out there. I've got this one from Arduino Tech, but all of them do require you to do a little bit of soldering. So if you decide that you do want to use a prototyping shield and make your project permanent, then having also a soldering iron like this one. So this is a 20-watt soldering iron with a button to turbo boost that temporarily to 130 watts just to make soldering faster. Then you will also need a soldering iron. Last, another very useful tool that's going to make your life much easier is the multimeter. So in this project we'll be using the multimeter primarily to make sure that we don't do mistakes. So as I'm connecting components onto the breadboard, and especially later onto the prototyping shield, I'll be using my multimeter here in continuity mode, which is this mode here, in order to make sure that I have connected correctly two components or a component on the breadboard, and I haven't created any short circuits. So I'll be moving the dial here where this little blue symbol that looks like the Wi-Fi signal is, putting my multimeter onto continuity testing mode, and then making sure that I have short circuit or I don't have short circuit. Sometimes having a short circuit is a good thing. For example, when you want to make sure that you've got 2 components on the correct trace, like that. or to make sure that two components on different sides or different parts of the board are not electrically connected like that, for example. So you'll be using the multimeter quite a lot when you move on to the prototyping shield phase if you decide to go that far in the project. It doesn't need to be a complicated or high-end multimeter. This is about middle of the range, but you can easily do the exact same thing with a $10 multimeter, since all of multimeters these days do have the continuity testing feature. That's about it with the tools. You can find a complete list of tools that you'll need in the external resources that come with this lecture.